This isn't your project anymore, Amelia. It's a family legacy now. You did a great job setting it up, but we'll take it from here." My brother Leo raised his glass to a crowd of cheering faces, his smile as bright and phony as a $3 bill. My mother beamed beside him, clutching my father's arm. They were standing on a stage I had built, in front of a crowd I had invited, at a launch party I had single-handedly funded, celebrating the revival of a vineyard they had let rot. My own glass of wine, from a vintage I had personally nursed from soil to bottle, trembled in my hand. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, a tight, brittle thing. And that night, I went home and legally dissolved the entire company. The legacy was mine, and I was about to take it back. It sounds so dramatic when I say it like that, so calculated. But if you had asked me that morning, I would have told you it was the happiest day of my life. The air in the valley was crisp, smelling of damp earth and late-blooming jasmine. Havenwood Vineyard, my grandfather's dream and my life's work for the past 4 years, was finally ready. The vines were heavy with perfectly ripened grapes. The new tasting room gleamed with polished oak and floor-to-ceiling windows. And the RSVPs for our grand reopening party had exceeded all expectations. I'd been there since 5 a.m., personally overseeing every last detail, from the placement of the string lights in the ancient oak tree to the chill on the Chardonnay. This wasn't just a business to me. It was a resurrection. When my grandfather passed away, he left the vineyard to my parents. They had no interest in the back-breaking work of viticulture. My father was a retired accountant who preferred spreadsheets to soil samples, and my mother's idea of agriculture was arranging flowers in a vase. They let it fall into disrepair. The vines grew wild, the equipment rusted, and the historic barn that served as the original winery began to sag. It broke my heart to see it, this place where I had spent my childhood summers learning about rootstock and terroir from a man whose hands were permanently stained with the earth. So 4 years ago, I made them a proposal. I had a degree in agricultural science and a small inheritance from my grandmother. I told them I would pour every cent I had and every ounce of my energy into bringing Havenwood back to life. The deal was simple. I would take on all the debt, all the risk, and all the work. I formed an LLC with myself as the sole managing member to protect them from liability. All they had to do was let me try. They agreed, probably thinking I'd fail within a year, and they could sell the land to developers without looking like the bad guys. They underestimated me. I spent the first year just clearing the land, pruning the neglected vines, and amending the soil. I took out loans, massive ones, all in my name, to buy new equipment and restore the barn. I worked 80-hour weeks, my hands calloused and my back aching, fueled by coffee and a desperate need to make my grandfather proud. My brother Leo would visit occasionally. He'd stroll through the fields in his designer sneakers, offering unsolicited advice. "You should really pivot to orange wine, Ames. It's very trendy." Or, "We should get a celebrity to endorse this place. I could probably get in touch with someone." He never once offered to lift a single bag of fertilizer. My mother would call to critique the new logo I designed, or to ask if I was sure about the shade of gray I'd painted the tasting room. My father just stayed silent, a ghost who only materialized when I sent them the quarterly progress reports. I was the engine, the fuel, and the entire damn train. But I did it. The first harvest was small but promising. The second was better. By the third, we were winning local awards. I built a brand from nothing, focusing on quality, sustainability, and the story of the land. The grand reopening wasn't just a party. It was a declaration. It was 4 years of my life, my money, and my soul, presented in a bottle. I invited everyone, local food critics, sommeliers from the city, our new wine club members, and of course my family. I wanted them to see what I had built. I wanted them to finally, for once, look at me and say, "You did it. We're proud of you." I was so naive. I was a fool, standing in the sunshine, completely blind to the storm that was about to break right over my head. The party was a resounding success, which, in retrospect, was probably what sealed my fate. People were raving. The wine was flowing. The food was exquisite. And the vineyard looked like something out of a magazine. I saw my father, who hadn't set foot on the property in years, accepting congratulations from a local journalist, as if he'd been stomping grapes himself. My mother was flitting from group to group, a grande dame holding court, talking about our little family venture. It was irritating, but I brushed it off. I was running on adrenaline and pride, moving through the crowd, making sure everyone had a full glass, answering questions about fermentation techniques and the unique minerality of our soil. Around sunset, Leo pulled me aside. "Hey, we're going to do a little toast," he said, a strange glint in his eye. "Just a quick thank you to everyone for coming." I smiled, thinking he was finally going to give me some credit. He probably wanted to be the one to do it, to be the charming spokesman. Fine. I didn't care who said the words, as long as they were said. I followed him to the small rustic stage we'd set up for the live band. He motioned for our parents to join him. I stood at the base of the stairs, expecting him to call me up. He tapped the microphone. "Hello, everyone! Wow! Look at this turnout," he began, his voice booming. His voice. "On behalf of the whole family, my mom, my dad, and myself, thank you for coming to celebrate the next chapter of Havenwood Vineyard." He paused for applause. I felt a small cold knot form in my stomach. On behalf of the whole family? He continued. When my grandfather started this vineyard, he had a vision of family, of legacy, a vision that, for a little while, got a bit lost. He gestured vaguely at the restored vines. It took a lot of work to get it back on track. A real team effort. I blinked. Team effort? My back twinged in phantom pain from the memory of hauling oak barrels by myself. Then came the knife. My sister, Amelia, has been a fantastic project manager these past few years, he said, giving me a quick, dismissive nod. A project manager, like I was a temp they'd hired. And we're so grateful for her work in getting the operational side of things up and running. The crowd politely clapped, looking at me with expressions of mild appreciation. I felt my face flush with heat. But now, he boomed, his voice filled with a salesman's passion, it's time for Havenwood to evolve. We're moving beyond just being a small local winery. We're taking this brand national. He clicked a button on a remote, and the screen behind him, the one I had rented to show a slideshow of the restoration process, flickered to life. It showed a new logo, a slick corporate-looking thing with a stylized H and the words Havenwood Estates underneath. I had never seen it before in my life. "We're rebranding," Leo announced proudly. "My father will be stepping in to handle the financials. My mother will be our director of events and hospitality. And I will be taking over as president and CEO to guide our strategic vision." He was radiating confidence. My mother looked like she was about to cry with pride. My father had a small, satisfied smirk on his face, and then he looked down at me, his smile not quite reaching his eyes, and delivered the line that changed everything. "This isn't your project anymore, Amelia. It's a family legacy now. You did a great job setting it up, but we'll take it from here." He raised his glass. "To the future of Havenwood Estates." The crowd, swept up in the moment, roared its approval. No one seemed to notice that the person who had built the entire thing was being publicly and systematically erased. I stood there, frozen, the cheers echoing in my ears like a death knell. They clinked their glasses on stage. My mother caught my eye and gave me a little, "Isn't this wonderful?" shrug, as if I should be thrilled. It was in that moment, seeing their triumphant, oblivious faces, that something inside me finally, irrevocably, broke. I don't remember much of the next hour. It's a blur of motion and sound. I think I nodded and smiled at a few people. I remember the pitying look from Marcos, my head groundskeeper, the only person who truly knew how much I had sacrificed. He started to walk towards me, a concerned look on his face, but I just gave him a tiny shake of my head and slipped away through the crowd. I didn't say goodbye to my family. They were too busy taking selfies on stage, basking in my light while trying to cast me in shadow. The drive home was silent. The triumphant playlist I had made for the occasion was still queued up on my phone, but I couldn't bring myself to press play. I walked into my small apartment, which I could barely afford, because every spare dollar had gone into the vineyard, and sat on my couch in the dark. The cold knot in my stomach had turned into a churning, white-hot rage. It wasn't just the humiliation. It was the audacity, the sheer breathtaking entitlement of it all. They had watched me bleed for that place. They had seen my exhaustion, my stress, my tears, and they saw it not as a sacrifice to be honored, but as an investment to be seized. I was the mule that had carried the gold out of the mountain, and now that we were at the market, they were ready to take the payout and send me to the glue factory, a project manager. The words echoed in my head. They had reduced 4 years of my life to a line on a resume, a temporary assignment that was now complete. And the new logo, the Havenwood Estates. It was a corporate coup, a hostile takeover disguised as a family toast. They must have been planning this for months. The secret meetings, the designer they hired behind my back, the roles they had assigned themselves. It was all a calculated play to usurp me the second the vineyard became profitable and prestigious. They waited until I had crossed the finish line, then pushed me off the winner's podium to take the trophy for themselves. I didn't cry. I was past tears. I was in a place of cold, stark clarity. For years, I had been operating under the assumption that we were a family, that deep down they loved me and wanted me to succeed. I see now that was a fantasy. I told myself to make the loneliness bearable. They didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as a resource, an asset. And now, they had decided to liquidate me. I stood up, walked over to my desk, and turned on my laptop. The screen illuminated my face in the dark room. My hands were perfectly steady as I typed in my password. I opened my legal folder on the desktop. There it was. Havenwood Vineyard, LLC. Formation documents. I clicked it open. My eyes scanned the legalese I had spent weeks poring over with my lawyer 4 years ago. And there it was, the clause that was about to become my salvation. Sole managing member, Amelia Holloway. I pulled up the business bank account. All the profits from the past year, the money from the advance ticket sales for the party, the first wave of wine club membership fees. It was all there. A healthy 6-figure sum I had planned to reinvest into a new bottling line, their future, their national expansion. My finger hovered over the transfer funds button. Then I logged into the domain registry for the website, havenwoodvineyard.com. Registered to me, paid for by me. With a few clicks, I redirected the entire site to a blank white page. Then I went to the business's social media accounts, the ones I had spent hundreds of hours building, cultivating a loyal following. I changed the passwords. All of them. Finally, I opened a new email. I addressed it to my lawyer. The subject line was simple. Dissolution of Havenwood Vineyard, LLC. In the body, I wrote a single sentence. Please begin the process immediately, as per our initial agreement. Let's talk Monday. I hit send. The sound of the sent email notification was quiet, but in the silence of my apartment, it sounded like a cannon shot. It was done. It took me less than 30 minutes to dismantle the kingdom they had just tried to steal. They wanted the legacy? Fine. They could have the rotting barn and the dead vines I had started with. The living, breathing, profitable entity they had just laid claim to on that stage had, for all intents and purposes, just ceased to exist. This wasn't the first time they had done something like this. My brain, now fully awake and humming with a grim energy, started pulling up memories from the archives, dusting them off and seeing them in this new harsh light. The pattern had been there all along. I just hadn't wanted to see it. It went all the way back to college. I had worked my tail off in high school, not just for the grades, but for the scholarships. I knew my parents wouldn't, or couldn't, contribute much. I ended up winning a major national science grant, a full ride for my first 2 years, plus a $20,000 cash prize for exceptional promise in the field of agricultural innovation. It was the proudest moment of my young life. The money was meant for research, for travel, for setting up my future. I made the mistake of telling my family about it over a celebratory dinner. My parents were happy, in their distant, polite way. But Leo's eyes lit up. At the time, he was in the middle of his first disastrous business venture. It was a subscription box for artisanal dog toys. He had ordered thousands of units of squeaky rubber chickens from a factory overseas without securing a single customer. The inventory was sitting in my parents' garage, and the bills were piling up. A week after my scholarship was announced, he cornered me. It started with praise. "Ames, you're a genius. Seriously, that grant is incredible." Then came the pivot. "You know, the thing about money is, it needs to work for you. That 20 grand could be 40 grand in 6 months." He laid out his plan. If I invested the cash prize into his company, he could launch a massive marketing campaign, fulfill his back orders, and become the next big thing in pet supplies. He promised he'd pay me back double. "It's a sure thing," he'd said. his voice oozing with confidence. "We're family. We help each other out. This is you helping me, so I can help all of us later." I was 20. I was naive. I wanted my older brother to be proud of me, to see me as a peer. And my parents backed him up. "He's got such a good head for business, Amelia," my mother said. "It's important to support family." My dad just nodded and said, "It's a loan, not a gift. He'll pay you back." So, like an idiot, I transferred the entire $20,000 to him. The marketing campaign was a bust. The company folded 3 months later. I never saw a single dime of that money again. When I asked about it, Leo got defensive. "Are you serious? It was a business risk. You knew that." My mother told me not to make things awkward by bringing up money. It was just gone. My research fund, my safety net, vanished into a pile of unsold rubber chickens. And no one ever apologized. I was just expected to absorb the loss and move on. Years later, when I got my first big promotion at an ag-tech firm, the pattern repeated. I had been working on a proprietary soil sensor technology. It was my baby. I led the research. I ran the trials. When the company launched it, it was a huge success, and I got a significant promotion and a bonus. I was finally feeling financially stable again after the scholarship debacle. I bought my first real car, a sensible, reliable SUV. A few weeks later, my mom called me. Their old car had broken down, and the repair costs were astronomical. "We just don't know what we're going to do," she sighed into the phone. The implication hung heavy in the air. So, I offered to let them use my new car for a while, just until they got things sorted. A while turned into 3 years. It effectively became their car. I took the bus to work. When I finally saved up enough to buy a cheap little clunker for myself and asked for the SUV back, you would have thought I'd asked for a kidney. "But we rely on this car, Amelia," my father said, his tone accusatory. "Your mother needs it for her appointments." Leo chimed in. "It's not a good look, Ames. Taking a car back from your parents." In the end, I just gave up and signed the title over to them. It was easier than fighting. It was easier than admitting that my generosity was seen as an obligation. Every time I achieved something for myself, they saw it as a new resource for them to tap. The vineyard wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being treated like a well, and they were angry that I had finally decided to put a lid on it. The first text message arrived at 7:15 a.m. the next morning. It was from Leo. A single, ominous question. "Did you do something to the bank account?" I was in my kitchen, making coffee, watching the sunrise. I felt a strange sense of calm. I had slept for 8 solid hours, a deep, dreamless sleep I hadn't experienced in years. I looked at the message, took a sip of my coffee, and didn't reply. A minute later, my phone buzzed again. This time, a group chat, newly created by my mother. Her, my dad, Leo, and me. "Mom, Amelia, your brother can't pay our suppliers. The account is empty. Please call me immediately. This must be a mistake." I watched the 3 little dots appear and disappear as Leo typed. Leo. "Mistake? Mom, she drained it." I'm looking at the statement. A single transfer to a personal account. Her account. "Dad, Amelia, answer your phone." I continued to sip my coffee. I could picture the scene perfectly. They were probably all in my parents' kitchen. The one with the granite countertops I had helped them install. My mother would be pacing, wringing her hands. My father would be sitting at the table, his face a thundercloud of silent rage. And Leo, he'd be on his phone, his initial confusion turning into righteous fury. The architect of the coup, furious that his target had a backbone. The messages started coming faster. Leo, the website is down. What the hell did you do? Leo, are you trying to sabotage us? After everything we've done for you? That one almost made me laugh. Everything they'd done for me. The sheer, unadulterated nerve. Mom, honey, please, this is scaring me. People are supposed to be showing up for tastings today. What do we tell them? I let them stew in it for a full hour. I let their panic build. I wanted them to feel that stomach-dropping lurch of helplessness, the feeling I had felt standing at the bottom of that stage. I wanted them to understand that the operational side of things, the part they had so casually dismissed, was the entire foundation of the business, and I had just pulled it out from under them. Finally, at 8:30 a.m., I sent my first and only reply to the group chat. I typed it slowly, deliberately. As of last night, Havenwood Vineyard LLC has been officially dissolved. There is no us. The business no longer exists. The silence that followed was more profound than their shouting. For a full 5 minutes, nothing. No one typed. No one called. I imagined them staring at their phones, the words sinking in. Dissolved. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a legal, binding, and devastatingly final act. Then, the explosion. It was even bigger than I had anticipated. My phone began to vibrate so intensely on the countertop it sounded like an angry hornet. A barrage of texts from Leo, each one more unhinged than the last. He called me a thief, a traitor, a sociopath. He accused me of destroying our grandfather's legacy out of spite. He threatened to sue me, to ruin my reputation, to make sure I never worked in the wine industry again. My mother switched from panicked pleading to guilt-tripping. How could you be so cruel? Your grandfather would be ashamed of you. You're tearing this family apart over a simple misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. That's what they were calling it. My father tried to call me 3 times in a row. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. His voice was cold, clipped, and full of restrained fury. Amelia, you have made a catastrophic error in judgment. You have embarrassed this family, and you have acted illegally. My lawyer will be in contact with yours. You have until the end of the day to reverse this foolish decision. I saved the voicemail. Then I blocked all their numbers. I wasn't interested in their threats, their blame, or their revised history. The conversation they wanted to have was one where they were the victims. But I knew the truth. This wasn't destruction. It was an extraction. I was finally extracting myself from a toxic equation I should have solved years ago. The quiet that descended after I blocked them was the sound of my own liberation. The week that followed was a masterclass in their escalating tactics. After the initial storm of rage and threats went unanswered, they shifted strategies. The first sign of their new approach came not from them, but from my main bottle supplier. I got an email from a guy named Frank who I'd worked with for years. He was apologetic but firm. His company had received an anonymous tip that my LLC was insolvent and that I was under investigation for financial fraud. Until the matter was cleared up, they were freezing my account and canceling our existing orders. It was a lie, of course, but a damaging one. The word fraud is poison in a small community. I knew instantly it was Leo. He couldn't beat me legally. My lawyer had already confirmed that my dissolution of the LLC was perfectly by the book. So he was resorting to slander, trying to burn my reputation to the ground so I couldn't rebuild. 2 days later, a scathing review appeared on a popular local food blog. It didn't mention me by name, but it referred to a once promising valley vineyard, now in shambles due to the erratic and unprofessional behavior of its former manager. It spoke of cancelled events and a toxic work environment, quoting anonymous former employees. I had only 2 employees, Marcus, my groundskeeper, and a part-time tasting room attendant. I called Marcus immediately. He was horrified. He told me Leo had called him, trying to get him to say something negative about me, even offering him a generous severance if he cooperated. Marcus had told him to get lost. The final move in their campaign of sabotage was the most audacious. They showed up at the vineyard. I wasn't there. I had told Marcus to keep the gate locked, but he called me as it was happening. My parents and Leo, standing at the gate demanding to be let in. When Marcus refused, citing private property laws, my father actually tried to tell him that since he was my father, he had a right to be there. They argued with him for 20 minutes before finally leaving. But before they left, Leo yelled, "This isn't over. This land is ours." That night, they came to my apartment. I was sitting in my living room, reading a book, when I heard the loud, insistent banging on my door. I didn't have to look through the peephole. It was Leo's knock, entitled and impatient. "Amelia, open the door. We need to talk." His voice was muffled but clear. I didn't move. I just sat there, my heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. "Stop hiding like a coward," he yelled, rattling the doorknob. Then my mother's voice, pleading. "Honey, please, let's just talk this out. We're your family." Family. The word had lost all meaning. A family doesn't plot to steal from you. A family doesn't try to ruin your career when you don't comply. They weren't a family. They were a board of directors who had just been fired, and they were refusing to leave the building. I put on my noise-canceling headphones, turned up my music, and continued to read my book. Eventually, the banging stopped. The silence they left behind was heavy with their defeat. They had tried rage, guilt, and intimidation. They had tried to turn my community against me, and none of it had worked. They had no power over me anymore, and the realization was clearly driving them insane. 2 days after they showed up at my apartment, I got a package. A small padded envelope with no return address left on my doorstep. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a small USB drive and a handwritten note on a piece of scrap paper. The note said, "I quit." He was recording everything. You should know what they were really saying. M. It was from Marcus. My heart sank. He had quit. I didn't blame him. He was a good man with his own family to think about, and he didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of my family's war. The fact that Leo had been recording him, trying to entrap him, was sickening. I plugged the drive into my laptop with a sense of dread. It contained a single folder labeled Tasting Room Convos. I clicked it open. There were about a dozen audio files, all recorded within the last few months. I pressed play on the first one. The sound quality was tinny, but the voices were unmistakable. It was Leo and my mother talking in the tasting room a few weeks before the party. "She's getting too attached to the place," Leo was saying. "She actually thinks it's hers." "Well, in a way, dear, it is," my mother replied, her voice syrupy. "She's done all the tedious work. It's only fair." "Fair?" "Mom, she used our family's land and our family's name to build it. We let her play her little farmer game. Now the real work begins. Branding, expansion, that stuff she can't handle. She has no vision." "You're right, of course," my mother agreed. "We just need to handle the transition delicately. We don't want her to feel pushed out." "She's not being pushed out," Leo scoffed. "She's being reassigned. She can manage the vines. That's what she's good at. Dirt and spreadsheets. I'll handle the big picture. Dad will keep the books clean. You'll be the face of the brand. It's perfect." I clicked on another file. This one was my father and Leo. "The LLC is a problem," my father was saying, his voice low and conspiratorial. "She has sole control. We need to convince her to restructure. Add us as partners. We'll tell her it's for tax purposes." "She won't go for it," Leo said. "She's smart. Stubborn." "Then we do it at the party," my father replied, his voice chillingly pragmatic. "We announce the new structure publicly. Put her on the spot. Make it impossible for her to say no without looking petty and ungrateful. We control the narrative." I listened to every single file. Each one was a fresh stab of betrayal. They mocked my passion, calling me Saint Amelia of the Vines. They laughed about how I was pouring my own money into their retirement plan. They had a detailed plan to dilute my ownership, marginalize my role, and ultimately seize total control of the business I had bled for. The grand reopening party wasn't a celebration. It was a public execution of my authority. The recordings laid it all bare. There was no misunderstanding. It was a premeditated, meticulously planned conspiracy. I copied the files to a secure cloud server. I sat there for a long time, the hum of the laptop the only sound in the room. The anger I had felt before was gone, replaced by a profound, glacial coldness. This was no longer just about a business. This was about the fundamental truth of who these people were. That night, I didn't send them the files. I didn't make any threats. I just sent one final text message to the now-defunct group chat, knowing they would still see the notification. It was 4 words. "I have the recordings." The reaction was instantaneous and telling. My mother replied within 30 seconds, her message a jumble of typos. "What recordings? Please call me. We can fix this." My father, the man of cold logic and threats, simply wrote, "Delete them." And Leo went completely silent. The bully, for the first time, was scared. They knew what was on those files. They knew it was undeniable proof of their malice. The power dynamic had shifted completely. I held the truth in my hands, a weapon of their own making. The vineyard was in limbo, a silent monument to their greed, and they were now living in fear of when, or if, I would choose to detonate the evidence of their betrayal. The future was a blank page. and for the first time, I was the only one holding the pen. It's been 6 months. The silence from my family has become a permanent state of being. It's a quiet that feels earned, like the stillness after a violent storm. The war is over, not because of a truce, but because I refused to keep fighting. I simply walked off the battlefield. Leo was the first to fold completely. After my text about the recordings, he vanished. A mutual acquaintance told me his investor for the national expansion, a wealthy friend he'd been bragging about, pulled out immediately after the party fiasco. Without my business and my reputation to leverage, Leo had nothing to offer. Last I heard, he had moved 2 states away and was working in sales for some corporate beverage distributor. He never messaged me again. He never tried to apologize. He just disappeared. A ghost haunted by his own ambition. My mother tried a different approach. For about a month, she sent me long, rambling emails. They were a bizarre cocktail of remorse, justification, and passive aggression. She'd start by saying how much she missed me and how sorry she was, then pivot to how I had overreacted and misinterpreted their intentions. One line from her last email is burned into my memory. "All we ever wanted was to be a part of your success. It's a shame you couldn't see that." She framed their attempted theft as a desire for inclusion, as if the only way they could be a part of my life was to own it. I never replied. Eventually, the email stopped. My father remained true to form. Utter, complete silence. He blocked me on social media. He instructed other family members not to speak to me. In his mind, I was the one who had committed the ultimate betrayal. I had refused to play my assigned role. I had exposed the family's carefully constructed facade of unity and success. By refusing to be their victim, I had become their villain. The embarrassment was something his pride could not endure, so he simply erased me from his reality. And the vineyard? Havenwood sits empty. After dissolving the LLC, I held on to the land itself. It's legally mine, paid for by the inheritance my grandmother left me, not them. For a few months, I couldn't even bring myself to go there. The place was tainted by their ghosts. But slowly I started going back. At first, just to walk the rows, to touch the leaves of the vines I had saved, to sit in the empty tasting room I had built. The pain is still there, a dull ache in my chest when I think of what they did. It's the unique grief that comes from mourning people who are still alive. But alongside the grief, there's a new feeling. Peace. A profound, unshakable peace. My phone doesn't ring with demands. My bank account isn't a lifeline for someone else's bad decisions. My successes are my own, to be celebrated or kept private as I see fit. The lesson in all of this wasn't about business or money. It was about worth. For years, I had tethered my self-worth to their approval. I worked myself to the bone, hoping that one day, one of my achievements would finally be enough to earn their love and respect. But the truth is, it never would have been. My success wasn't a source of pride for them. It was a resource to be exploited. The more I gave, the more they expected. The recordings prove that. It wasn't my failure they feared, but my independence. I had to be willing to lose everything I had built to save the one thing that truly mattered: myself. I had to destroy the vineyard to protect its soul, which was my own. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of self-preservation. They thought my grandfather's legacy was the land, the name, the bottles of wine. But they were wrong. His true legacy was the strength he instilled in me, the strength to cultivate something beautiful from nothing, and the strength to protect it from the blight. So, what comes next? I'm not sure. I've had offers for the land. Developers are circling, their mouths watering at the prospect of prime real estate. But I can't bring myself to sell it. Not yet. Lately, I've been thinking about my grandfather. I've been thinking about the new logo Leo designed, that soulless corporate, Havenwood Estates. It was never an estate. It was always a haven. My haven. Last week, I drove out there with a hammer and a crowbar. I walked up to the large wooden sign at the entrance, the one Leo had commissioned right before the party. It still said, Havenwood Estates. I spent an hour prying off their cheap plastic letters. Underneath, a bit faded but still strong, was the original hand-carved sign I had restored myself. Havenwood Vineyard. I'm starting over, on my own terms. It will be smaller, quieter. It won't be a national brand. It will be a place of integrity, of passion, of hard work. A place my grandfather would recognize. A place that's truly mine. This time, there's a new sign on the gate. It's a small, simple one. It just says, trespassers will be prosecuted. It's a boundary, a promise to myself. My life is no longer a family business. It's a private enterprise. And I am, finally, the sole proprietor. I know some of you watching this might think what I did was harsh. Maybe you think family is family, no matter what. And for a long time I believed that too. I believed that love meant endless forgiveness, that loyalty meant absorbing endless pain. But I've learned that true love doesn't demand you set yourself on fire to keep others warm. True family doesn't see your strength as a threat or your success as their property. This journey has been the most painful and liberating experience of my life. It taught me that sometimes the most important project you can ever work on is building boundaries. Sometimes the most successful harvest you can have is the one where you finally weed out the toxic people in your life, even if they share your blood. My peace is non-negotiable now. My work, my home, my heart, they are no longer open for hostile takeovers. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where your generosity was treated like an obligation, or your success was something to be claimed by others, I want you to know you're not alone. The process of reclaiming yourself is hard, but the silence on the other side is worth it. Let me know your story in the comments below. How did you learn to protect your own haven? Thank you for listening.